Welcome. I want to talk about today. The topic is going to be, what fruit do you bear? I don't know if you've heard that expression or not, but it's basically saying, and what it means is, imagine yourself as a tree, and when it's that season, after you've done your growing and after you've gone through that process of building and putting in the work, okay, when it's finally time for you to yield fruit, what is that? What is that like? Are you yielding healthy fruit? Are you yielding good fruit or bad fruit? What fruit do I bear is a question that one can ask themselves in order to get a reality check, in order to ground yourself but towards the fact of, what do I have to produce? What am I producing when I look at, and we're going to look at things that matter. We're going to talk about the mental state of being. We're going to talk about physical state, emotional state, and we're going to talk about the spiritual state and what this has to do with the fruits that I bear. So when it comes to mentally, what fruits do you bear? How deep are you willing to think as far as mentally? Do you bear fruit that you're able to challenge your own way of thinking, or do you bear fruit of you not being able to be relatable, or not just relatable, but be able to hear another one of your own thoughts and be able to say, that's the one I need to bear, actually. That is much more structurative than this one telling me, oh, give up, don't try hard, or the mental thought of, I need to push forward and I can't keep doing the same thing and I have to do something that's going to make me out of that fixated normalcy that you have yourself set in. If you are currently bearing bad fruit as far as mentally, any sort of thought that you have, you can view it as a fruit that you're bearing, or that has the possibility to come to fruition, because the thought that you have, if you go ahead and put any power behind that thought or more energy into that thought form, then there's a possibility it could sprout up again. It could get relayed back upon when something happens to trigger that, and then all of a sudden you're thinking that same way again. But when you actually deal with it at the root and actually choose a higher mental thought pattern, then don't want to do it, then F this, I'm not even going to pay attention, or I'm not even going to try because of this or because of that. You have to find that positive self-talk and to be able to help you mentally in order to bear good fruit. Because what are you going to just continue on thinking the same way that you have thought for whoever knows how long? Or will I just keep thinking the same thing and thinking the same way, even if it causes me to bear bad fruit? Shouldn't I switch the way that I am? Because if I'm bearing bad fruit, then what do I have to even say for myself? Not only is it about if you do anything as far as building up or productive in the mental realm, what are you saying for yourself? What do you have to speak for as far as mentally? How are you thinking about these topics? How do you think about these topics? Do you produce a fruit when those topics are in question or in communication? Do you produce one that can see how it comes together and how that thought form might not be the right fruit, but where that came from, and see the starting point and be like, okay, this went wrong because you didn't attack that thought or that impulsivity of or reaction to certain thought forms, that it got to the point where you went with the bad fruit. You went bearing that fruit, not realizing that I can switch this. I can become the pilot in my mind and be able to say, okay, we're gonna go. I signed off on that thought form via the mental realm, let's say, travel agenda, right? I signed off on that. Okay, we can use that thought form. Let's use that thought form. Let's bear that fruit. Let's not bear this fruit. Let's not do that. You have to be able to control the mind, and sometimes the mind is so difficult because there are things that are subconsciously planted in your mind that you can't get to unless you get that deep and you start bearing good fruit in order to get that deep and peel back the layers of the mental realm in order to even be able to get into bearing good fruits when it comes to those hard, not just any, well, really just any thing when it comes to the mental realm. When we talk about, okay, do I build good fruit as far as mentally? Am I good at communicating? Am I able to communicate a thought to somebody else? And then that can be seen as, yeah, that's a good fruit. Versus do I communicate in a way that's problematic towards the situation and towards that situation becoming more expanded and more, let's say, growth in the long run, more expansion? Am I going to be able to produce good fruit as far as communicating to those you love, those you are close to, those individuals, and then not only that, but closest to yourself? Do you bear good fruit in order for you to have a healthy mind state? And if there is something that is possibly you are doing mentally that you have to perceive, and then you have to go ahead and you can change it, then go ahead and do that. Put in the work that you have to do in order to make sure that you are in a right mind state. And everything is going to be a challenge because you're going to use that mental realm in every situation that you go through. There's just a more extreme or a less intensity that you will be using that mind, and challenging that mind by having to deal with the hard parts is going to cause more growth and more expansion as far as mentally. And so we're talking about what fruit do you bear, and we're talking about when it comes to mentally. And we basically talked about how if you're not bearing the right fruit as far as mentally, many other things could be going on here in the mental realm or mental state that could be something that you need to work through. And sure, you can be really good at maybe detaching from that, but you really need to work towards, and if you're growth minded, work towards making that a good fruit, the fruits of your labor. You know, what are the fruits of your labor as far as mentally? Strive for that to be good as far as the mental realm, good thoughts, behaviors, actions, any of that stuff. Strive for the mental to be strong, and you will produce more good fruit of your labor, per se, right? And what we really mean is, what space are you in, right? We could say the fruits of your labor, but what that really means is that's the state that you're in, right? You can't tell me that you go ahead and you say, what's the fruits of your labor to an apple? I mean, that's the state that it's in. Of course, it's the obvious answer. You don't even need a response for that question. But when you ask a being, hey, what's the fruit of your labor? It's going to be things that they are in that space too as well. That person is being productive, being consciously aware. Talk about the fruits you bear, I mean, that's the state that you're in, truly. It has to do truly with the state that you're in. So we'll move on. We'll go ahead and I'll see which one we'll go into right now, but it's getting dark, so might turn on a little lamp over here, honestly, but I think we're good right now. When it comes to, oh, and I wanted to say, I was gonna make some more video outside, but that will be coming now that the weather is getting warmer and warmer. I'll be able to be out and recording actually while I'm not necessarily indoors, so that'll be something that I look forward to. I mean, I always look forward to summer and then being able to be outside and just be in the perfect temperature at nighttime, though, like really late at the night, and when everything's most quiet and relaxed. And going into what fruits do you bear, let's talk about spiritually. What fruits do you bear as far as spiritually? And everyone is going to have fruits of their labor when it comes to spiritually. Everyone has a spirit, and a spirit is inside of that vessel. So each being has a spirit / soul. And when we talk about that, you're automatically going to have things that are intrinsic to you that lead into the mental, that lead into the physical, that lead into the emotional. Remember, you're a spirit first, so that comes with saying that, I don't even want to say if it's a good or a bad fruit, or judge. You don't even want to judge anyone on that or not, because that's so intrinsic to your soul, and that's something that is sacred to the self. And not just to the self, but to life, it's sacred. And that means that'll be taken the most seriously when everything is all said and done. And so, do you just believe anything that you hear as far as spiritually, or do you have strong, let's say, perspective of the way that you look at the world? And that's for each one to be able to do that for themselves. But the thing is, we're all growing as far as spiritually. From the point that you get here into the space, you're growing as far as spiritually. Just like your body ages and the mind ages, just so does your spirit. It becomes more and more experienced. The more and more experiences you've lived through as a spirit, these things become intrinsic to you. And then if you are being a strong spirit, then what do you know? You'll be able to most likely produce good fruits of your labor mentally, good fruits of your labor emotionally, good fruits of your labor physically, and the actions that you carry out and whatnot. But that's why we say, or not we, that's why I say, as far as spiritually, because each one has their own do you actually put in work around the way that you spiritually perceive the reality that you're in, right? How true, not just are you a real spirit, how true of a spirit are you, right? And so that's when it comes to that, And then when we talk about the fruits that you bear emotionally, what are the fruits that you bear emotionally? Okay, well, we're talking about how I can act in a certain situation out of emotional trauma, out of emotional response, out of emotional, what's the word that I always use? It's not this, but it's an emotional agenda that you have that then causes you to act a certain way. I could act out of that, and that could be either a good or a bad fruit that bears out of that emotional state of being. So you have to be able to be emotionally strong and emotionally stable enough, right? There's going to be fluctuations, there's going to be times where you're stable and you're unstable as far as emotionally, but that's just because of the opposition that life throws at us. And as you grow as a being, and you learn more and you experience more, there's things that when you interact with life that they just happen to act upon your emotional state of being that way. Whether you're like we are in nowadays, in buildings and in rooms and in cities and everything like that, or you go back hundreds of years of the people who lived on this land, the natives, and whether they were doing that too, they still had an emotional response. Maybe they were less emotionally unstable than most people are today, and that could be a lot of reasons why things are playing out the way they are as far as emotionally and in the emotional realm, because I honestly see that it's something that people are neglecting to look at, something that people are neglecting to even mention. And I just mention it because these are 4 states of beings that everyone knows exist, and there are different states of beings, like I've talked about before. Transmutation state of being, that's another state of being. All of these are states of being. So there's more that I can talk about, but we're just talking about these ones right now. And that gets our ground bases and our air bases and our in-between bases and our sub bases. That gets everything covered. But we still have to realize that we bear a certain thing as far as emotionally. Are you emotionally unstable? Are you emotionally dependent on certain things to happen? And then your emotional state of being, it's no mas, because you don't have any, emotion, good emotion that's pushing that towards being a good action coming out from that emotion. So if you do not think that you're stable enough as far as emotionally, then you probably don't bear the strongest fruits as far as emotionally when it comes to the fruits of your labor. And it takes work. That's why you have to work on it, right? Work on these things. And if you don't work on these things, don't expect things to change just because you have high hopes for it or whatever that may be. You have to go through it. That's what it takes, and you're gonna do what it takes if that's what you want to do. So that's on that end when it comes to emotionally. Try to be emotionally stable, and like I said, with life, there's gonna be ups, there's gonna be downs. That's just how it is. But you have to ride the wave. You can't, of existence and of life that we're in, you can't continuously neglect the emotional state of being. And you can do that, but should you? You should just ask yourself that question to find out for yourself, and if what you're getting from life is that, yes, it is time for me to change as far as emotionally, or to bear different fruit as far as what I bear through my emotional state of being, then you will move on to having much stronger and much stable emotional state of being, and bearing therefore better fruit emotionally, better relationships, better experience to experience, state to state ability to be stable in your existences and in your situations and scenarios. What fruits do you bear physically? Do you take care of the vessel? Do you take care of it? And what will you do to show that you want to continue to take care of it? And what will that fruit bear? Will that fruit truly bear you becoming more healthy? You deciding to do something as far as physically that you've been waiting on doing and that you haven't got to? Are you bearing good fruit to where if there's something that has to be done, then you just go and you do it? Because the fruit that you bear is fruit of productivity and of hard work. Whether the intent behind that is something that you just have to do because it's a situation that we have to do, okay, but you're still doing it in a certain way, and that certain way that you're doing it is there no matter what. That energy is there no matter what is at state specifically in the physical work that you're aligned with. So, and these things translate over. Don't think just because you're doing one thing that you may have to do, but you're still doing it productively and you're still doing it at a high level, that skill is still with you intrinsically for you to be able to apply that on another sector as far as the work that you put in to the existence physically, therefore to get out results, and then therefore bear this kind of fruit when it comes to interacting with the world. So what fruit do you bear? I don't have to ask any of these questions because people should be able to think for themselves. And that was just a quick rundown on what fruit do you bear. I know we kind of got into a lot of things, and well, me and the viewer, I know specifically that this video that I made, and if I asked what fruit did I bear, this is a good fruit that I bear. One, I went out and I challenged myself as far as mentally, challenged physically, challenged myself as far as spiritually, challenged myself as far as emotionally to put this out here. I know that this is a good fruit that I bared because I was being in my power when I was doing so. When you are speaking through your true self and not allowing some mental, physical, emotional, or spiritual anything to affect you, and you're making sure that you go against that tension, you go against that opposition that you have, that one may deal with existing in the life. And that's how you bear good fruit.